Welcome back to the Cinema Recall podcast. I am the Vern, and happy Thanksgiving. I know that right now you're probably preparing food for your friends and family, or maybe you are just in a turkey coma right now, not able to move. So I've got some great podcast episodes for you to hear. So right now you're going to be hearing our wonderful episode we did with Becca from Do You Expect Us to Talk? Talking about the film Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock classic. We also get into Gus Van Sant's remake as well. That's a lot of fun. You're going to be hearing that very shortly. Over on our Patreon page, again, patreon.com/cinemarecallpod, you are going to be getting an exclusive preview of our episode we did with Kaylee from Once Over with Kaylee, aka Lucy Tightbots from Who Are These Pods, talking about the film Willard, the 2003 remake starring Crispin Glover, Arlie Ermey, Laura Herron. That's very cool. That's over on our Patreon page. And then over on our YouTube page, you're going to be getting the uncut video version of my interview with Leanne Steele from Hustlers to Housewives. So that's very cool. But there's even more. All right. You're going to be so much full. Over on rabbitholepodcast.com, we just released our latest episode of The Rotten Truth. Jason Soto and I talking about the film Howard the Duck. It's one of my favorites, and it's a lot of fun to talk about on there. That's over on rabbitholepodcast.com. And then I was a guest on these other podcasts over on Collateral Cinema /Collateral Gaming. Hosts Bo Maddox and Ashley Chancellor talk about the film Street Fighter, the 1994 video game movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. And we are joined by none only Jim from Film Rage. So the four of us talk about Street Fighter, the movie, a lot of fun. And then over on the Film Effect podcast, Ed from there and I talk about the film Twilight Zone, the movie. And that was very cool. So definitely check out all those places there. Collateral Cinema, Collateral Gaming, the Film Effect podcast, The Rotten Truth, and then us here at Cinema Recall. Very cool stuff. If you want to know Ashley Jurok, my wonderful co-host, she will be back on later episodes. She won't be on all the time because of our work schedule, but we're supposed to do our best of the year and our Christmas episode coming up very soon. So thank you very much for listening or watching. Love you very much, and let's get on to our show talking about Psycho with Becca from Do You Expect Us to Talk? Enjoy. Love you. Bye. This podcast may contain adult language, adult situations, spoilers, and some brief nudity, so parental guidance is suggested.
We have such sights to show you.
After about 5 minutes of this movie, you're gonna wish you had 10 beers.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Oh, well. La-di-da, la-di-da, la-la, yeah.
Welcome back to the Cinema Recall podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome out there to the Cinema Recall podcast. I am, of course, the Vern. Thank you for listening. Ashley, our co-host, will be back later on. I know I say that every episode, but, we are planning our Christmas episode. But joining me, I'm very happy to have her on here. Probably my second or third guest from across the pond. We have Becca here from Do You Expect Us to Talk podcast. Hello, Becca.
Hi, hello.
It is nice to have you here. I thank you very much for joining me on this episode. If you saw the description, you know that we are going to be talking about Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's seminal, most iconic movie that he's made, and we're getting excited to talk about that and other features. But before we do that, Becca, please tell us all about your show, Do You Expect Us to Talk?
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and glad we finally made it. Can I just say how much I love your podcast?
Aww.
You have such incredible guests and talk about a diverse range of movies, so, yeah, really enjoying your show. So. But, yeah, my podcast is called Do You Expect Us to Talk? We've been running for, maybe 8 or 9 years, so a long time. I do it with my I co-host my show with my co-hosts Dave Bond and Chris Byrne. fellow movie fans. Dave likes a wide range of movies, and Chris, he used to run a show called Action Junkies. But the three of us, we really love movies. Our name might be familiar to Bond fans, as it's a spin on that classic line from Goldfinger, "Do you expect me to talk?" Because all three of us were all huge James Bond movie fans. And we started off as a James Bond podcast, reviewing all the Bond movies. But we've since branched out to other films, other series, so like Marvel, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Star Trek. You name it, we've covered it so far. And we're currently on a Hitchcock series, which is like my pet project, because he's my favourite director. So yeah, really enjoying it. And who thought we'd still be going nearly 10 years later? Oh my gosh.
That is amazing. The really great thing about this whole community of other podcasts is I feel like I'm discovering a brand new podcast show every day. And all of them are just incredibly well done. And so I know for sure I'm very excited about this, Becca, because we are taking a small hiatus from Cinema Recall. And this is perfect because I have a chance right now to just catch up on all of these great shows, especially, your story here, Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm excited to get into your Beverly Hills Cop series. And then
yes, we had great fun doing that. I mean, some series, like, we've been big fans of, like, for example, with Bond, like, because all of us are big fans, and we've seen all the films many times inside out. But there are some series where, like, I haven't seen them, or perhaps I've been saving them up. So, like, for example, I've seen the best Beverly Hills Cop movie, but I hadn't seen any of the sequels. I've seen the new one that came out. Lethal Weapon is another good one that we did. Again, they'd been on my list, but I hadn't actually got round to it, so I'm glad to be ticking those films off. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the Beverly Hills Cop series. We had a great time with it. And we really enjoyed the new one as well. So
that was a good one. And I'm excited to check out your Austin Powers series that you had going on, because I've been watching some of those with my family members. So I'm excited to see you get into those features as well.
We enjoyed those as well. Obviously, huge Bond fan, so it's it's a classic spoof. But we go a bit different with those. I think because with comedy, it tends to be a bit difficult because it's all subjective, really. And what
true,
obviously with his Mike Myers kind of brand of comedy isn't perhaps for everybody. And also at the time the films were made, similar to Bond, they're of a particular time. Perhaps some of the jokes might not fly now. I don't know. But it was, it's something that was a big part of for us growing up, and obviously being huge fans of the spy genre. It was a fantastic spoof. Great cast.
I have to ask you about this, Becca. Maybe you know about this. There is a series of films made by the same director of The Artist. It's a spoof of James Bond, and I want to say it's like 0117.
Oh yeah, is it OSS 117? Yeah, it's got Jean Dujardin. I can't pronounce his name. My French is terrible. It is very much a spoof of like the 60s Bond kind of spy movies. I don't know. I think they've got a home release over here in the UK. I don't know if they've ever got a cinematic release. Sadly, I don't think so. But yeah, I've got one of them somewhere. It's really good, really funny, like great high production values. A great watch.
I think those movies spoof the whole 60s Bond series better than Austin Powers did.
Yes.
And I think it's a style of movies that not many people have seen. And I really thought after the success of The Artist, they would re-release those movies back in theaters and have it be its own thing and maybe do better. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? This is it. It's just one of those things. Well, it seems like there's quite a few. Literally just a quick look on IMDb goes all the way back to 1957, 1960 sort of thing. So It's very much came out of that kind of like 50s, 60s spy craze that seemingly was kicked off by Bond. But obviously Europe kind of picked up and ran with. But yeah, I need to check those out actually. What was the one I've got? Cairo Nest of Spies, that was it. And it turned out there was one in 2021 from Africa with Love, apparently. But highly recommend it, definitely.
Very cool. Well, before we do get into our conversation about Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho, I do have one sort of section of the show, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot for this.
Oh, no.
But it's our Race Corner. It's our Rage Corner, brought to you by the great gents over at the Film Rage Podcast. Rage Corner is where you can just rage happily or madly about anything going on in the entertainment industry. Just anything. And if you need me to start off with something, I can. Or if you have an idea.
Oh gosh, I feel I've come completely unprepared. I'm sorry.
Oh no, because I did not prepare you for this at all. All right, is there anything going on in the movie world? Was there a movie you saw that you were really happy about, or maybe you heard some movie news that you're upset about, or vice versa?
Well, obviously being a Bond fan, I can complain that the film isn't coming out quick enough. Obviously, Bond fans, we're very patient. You know, we've gone through 6-year droughts without any news. Obviously, between License to Kill and Goldeneye, and likewise we had a big gap from in the Craig era due to the pandemic when No Time to Die came out, and now again we're in this kind of Bond wilderness where we don't know what's going on. It seems like Barbara and Michael are focusing on other things. Obviously their 007 Road to a Million series with MGM Amazon. Just get on and make the film. That's kind of my rant. I mean, I totally get that. I'm very patient. I don't feel like they owe us anything. I trust that everything's in their hands. I am quite a nice person, really. But if you want me to rant, that's my rant. I'll be like, just get on with it.
Well, that brings me to my other question for you, Becca. Who would you like to see cast as Bond?
Oh my gosh, there's a question. Oh dear, I might have to think about that one.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've got lots of different names that just like pop off the top of my head.
Well, yeah. What's the first one that pops up in your head?
Oh gosh, who's that guy who was in Poldark? I must look him up. I'm terrible with names. I do apologise.
Oh no, I don't even know what this show is. Or
Poldark. Let's have a look. Who was it? Aidan Turner. That was it. Yeah. So a few years ago here in the UK, obviously I think during the 70s and 80s, there was a really popular adaptation of the books called Poldark, set along the Cornish coast. And that was remade probably 2015, 2016. Costume drama with Aidan Turner, very handsome, as the male lead, very romantic. And then I think he made an adaptation of And Then There Were None, Agatha Christie story, and in which he appeared in a tuxedo. And they thought, he's the one for Bond. So I think he'd be quite good in the role.
Yeah. I will take your word for it. I don't know who this actor is or that show or anything. And plus, I don't really know a lot of Bond to really put any of my 2 cents into this. I've seen a few movies of his. My brother-in-law has the whole box set of the shows, and I will go check them out because they're a lot of fun. So yeah,
I think they're all on Amazon Prime now as well. Obviously, they've done the deal with MGM. And they're all on. If you have Prime, other streamers are available. But yeah, you can listen to our podcast and check out our reviews. Maybe a bit non-safe for work. Back in the early days, we were a little bit sweary. But yeah, you can check out our reviews. Yeah, I mean, it's check your brain at the door. It don't really require much thought. Just good fun. So
I love it. Well, my rant has to do with news of recent adaptations that are coming out. I found out that Luca Guadagnino, the man who made the remake of Suspiria, is doing a remake of American Psycho. And
oh gosh, I heard about that. Oh my god.
I'm very hesitant, but also kind of excited in a way because I really loved what he did with Suspiria, and he made it a completely new version that doesn't crap on the original. I mean, he's playing homage to it, and I like the way that it's done in a different style. And
he made it his own, though.
Exactly. So, but that original American Psycho by Mary Herron is really good. I mean, I don't know how anyone can top Christian Bale playing
he is Patrick Bateman. Oh my gosh.
Even when he saw Batman, he was Patrick Bateman.
Batman Begins. Exactly.
I just felt like, oh my gosh, Bruce Wayne is going to go psycho and kill people. I'm just waiting for that moment.
Well, the two are quite similar. They both have a light in the dark. They both got a duality, split personality there, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. No, 100%. So I just found it to be just odd, but I'm intrigued what he's going to do. The second one I'm a little worried about, and it's with the adaptation of Carrie by Mike Flanagan.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh my god.
Yeah, so Mike Flanagan wants to turn Carrie into a series. Of course,
Oh.
Mike Flanagan did the adaptation of Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, and Mike Flanagan, famously used the Stanley Kubrick version for the sequel, and so it's a nice little homage to Kubrick's version as well as Stephen King's book. So now that he's going to be doing Carrie, and he has a good track record of Stephen King. Of course, he did the Gerald's Game as well, and that was a great adaptation. So I know he can do this. My issue is that Brian De Palma's Carrie has been seeped into everyone's brain. And they tried to remake this twice. They did like a TV version in like the early 2000s with Angela Bettis, who is in
Yeah, I
May.
think I've seen that. Yeah, it's interesting.
And then, Patricia Clarkson's in that one. And then you also had this most recent version in 2013 with Chloe Moretz Grace and Julianne Moore, directed by Kimberly Pierce. And that one is fine, but they are clearly taking homages and references to the De Palma version, to even have like the same lines that were said by Cece Spacek and I want to say Piper Laurie in the original one.
Yeah, the Brian De Palma one is so seared into pop culture, isn't it? So
yeah, so I am intrigued because I know Mike Flanagan is a good director. I just have an issue because if an adaptation already worked well once, I don't think adapting it into newer times is going to make it that much better. Like, you can have a story be set in the 70s and made in the 70s, and it can still have the same theme and messages today without the use of, like, cell phone or, AI type of technology. That's why the adaptation of Child's Play failed, because they tried to make it too modern, and it didn't really need to be a modern story,
No, I wonder if it will be a period piece, and no puns intended. It will be set in that era.
Oh. See, I was thinking they're going to go way back instead of being a 70s feature, do like an 1870s.
They might do. Yeah, you might be right.
That would be kind of a cool thing to do, like have an 1870s and just have like a Victorian era type of Carrie.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Imagine all the costumes. That would be interesting. But
like,
yeah.
Can you imagine almost like a Jane Austen sort of like style of like horror with Carrie in there and she's being the outcast?
Oh, wow. Well, they made... did they ever do the film version of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies? I know it's completely different.
I think they did. Maybe I don't.
Anyway, that's off topic. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. No, fair enough. I love there. All right. Well, we're going to get into our version of Psycho here, but I am going to play just a quick ad spot of some other great podcast shows, and then we will be right back.
We got to take a short break, but Cinema Recall will be right back after these ad spots.
Was A Quiet Place inspired by Signs, It Comes at Night, and War for the Planet of the Apes? Was Ready Player One influenced by Avatar, Wreck-It Ralph, and The Last Starfighter? Is The Hurricane Heist more influenced by Sharknado or Geostorm? These are the kinds of questions my guest co-hosts and I discuss on my podcast, Piecing It Together. Every week, we look at a new movie and try to figure out what other movies inspired it. Whether it's the story, the character development, tone, or even use of music. Every movie was influenced by something that came before, and we want to figure out what. Check out Piecing It Together on your favorite podcast app or check us out on piecingpod.com. You can also follow us on social media at piecingpod. Piecing It Together is a part of the All Points West podcast network.
Get access to episodes early, uncut video footage, and bonus shows by becoming a Patreon member. Go to patreon.com/cinemarecallpod. And for just $3 a month, you will help support our independent podcast. Thank you so much, and now back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone. Cinema Recall podcast. Sitting here now with Becca of Do You Expect Us to Talk podcast. And we're here talking about the movie Psycho. Came out in 1860, starring Anthony Perkins, Vera Miles, Janet Leigh, John Gaston, I believe his name is. Based on the book of Psycho, written by Robert Bloch. Screenplay by Joseph Stefano, I believe. I believe that this is a movie that's very well known, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about plot dynamics of this. But I do want to ask you this, Becca. When did you first see Psycho, and was this your first Hitchcock movie, or did you have a Hitchcock movie you saw before this?
Oh gosh, probably when I was way too young to watch it. Yeah, it probably was, if I could say the term, the gateway drug. It probably was my way in to Hitchcock. It's certainly one of the ones I remember seeing to begin with. It was also kind of my first introduction to Anthony Perkins as well. He's one of my favourite actors, and also Janet Leigh. To all these amazing talent that Hitchcock manages to bring together over the course of his movies.
And did Janet Leigh make this before or after Touch of Evil? I'm just trying to...
I think she made this afterwards.
Okay.
I think she worked with Orson Welles first. But that's also an iconic movie. It's got one of the most amazing tracking shots ever to open a film.
And
absolutely fabulous. A lot of people say Welles is overrated, and he probably is, but I think he's another great director.
Oh, no, he's great. And I know that when I saw this movie... because I think I've actually seen, because it played on TV a lot, Psycho 2. And the opening of
fantastic.
Psycho 2 has the opening shower sequence. So I know I've seen that, and it's been used in other clip shows, but I totally remember Psycho 2 being played on TV more often. So I know I saw that movie more than I saw Psycho. And so when I finally got a chance to watch Psycho, all I knew was just that one moment, the famous shower sequence. And when you watch Psycho, you think it's going to be focusing on the killer and just doing all these horrible things. But no, it starts with Janet Leigh's character, and it's almost a crime drama of her trying to rip off her bank so that she can use the money to live with her boyfriend. Because and I feel too, in the opening of that movie, that they're both having kind of a secret affair with each other. She's not involved with anyone, but I believe that he is. That's why they have to go to the seedy sort of motel to fool around.
Yeah, I think so. He's obviously part of the way. Yeah, I think it's John Gavin actually. So I kind of think he's divorced or getting a divorce or going through that procedure with his ex. So obviously Janet Leigh's kind of getting in there, and they have to remain respectful, but despite that they have these kind of illicit meetings in these dodgy looking hotel rooms. I don't know.
And you gotta admit too, for being the 60s, that's gotta be kind of a taboo thing to actually have in a movie, to actually have a couple that are not married and kind of living in sin, as they'd say back then.
Well, this is it. Yeah, I mean, attitudes have changed a lot. Today, it's probably not that shocking, but probably back in 1960 or in late 50s, early 60s, when this was being made, it probably would have been quite shocking as well, especially to see John Gavin shirtless, or even Janet Leigh just in her underwear, just in a bra and slip. Perhaps that was something you might not have seen. But then Hitchcock was known for kind of pushing the boundaries, trying to fool the censors, trying to push the envelope to see what he could get away with.
There's a movie, and I don't quite remember the name of it, but I think maybe it was in North by Northwest, or it could have been in another feature, and you'll have to help me out with this. But there's a sequence where two characters are kissing, but Hitchcock had to cut the kiss, so it wasn't too long, or it didn't dwindle or too long, because apparently it made people uncomfortable. So it showed characters kiss, and then they have to back off, or has it cut to something else.
Oh, I wonder what that was. It might have been maybe Notorious, maybe Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman. I don't know. That's a good question, actually. I was testing my Hitchcock knowledge.
That could very well be, and I'm sure our listeners will just be...
It could have very well been John Gavin and Janet Leigh. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I think, because like anything like that kind of had to last a certain amount of time. Otherwise, the censor would go, no, you can't show it. You know, the MPAA would be all over it.
Yeah. I think it's the first time we actually see a couple in bed too. I mean, they most couples
this is
in bed. Well, in most TV shows, they always have the couple in like separate beds type of thing.
Yeah, but I think to show them together in the same bed, I think they had to kind of. I think reading a lot of like how they made this film. Just a quick shout out. One of the great books about the making of this film is Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho by Stephen Rebello. He's got a new book out, which I think is about the making of On the Waterfront, which is coming out this month, someone. So check that out. But yeah, his book about making of Psycho is probably the best behind the scenes book or the making of book you can probably ever read on any film ever. I highly recommend that. But yeah, I think they said when they were making this film, I can't remember if it was Janet Leigh or John Gavin, I can't remember, but I want to say Janet Leigh, but she had to have like one foot on the floor, so like she had like part of her was on the bed, and then part of it was on the floor, actually touching the floor, to make it acceptable.
Yeah, just great stuff they would do with that. And so I'm just trying to recalculate like my first time like watching this. So when you did see this for the first time, I mean, did you know about that famous shower sequence before watching this, or
it's one of those like with Carrie, as we talked about, it's one of those scenes like it's just seeped into popular culture. It's like if anyone goes and makes that kind of motion, kind of where it's from, regardless of whether or not you've seen it. It's been spoofed in so many other films, like The Simpsons famously spoofed it with Homer getting whacked over the head in a mallet by Maggie when he's building this terrible spice rack. But very cleverly done. It's probably one of the best spoofs I've ever seen. I'm a huge Simpsons fan as well. It's one of those iconic points of pop culture, really. So it was cool to finally figure out, that's where that's come from. Oh, okay. But amazing. Yeah, it's just one of those really iconic moments that never sort of really gets old. Like, no matter how many times I watch it, the anticipation, you think, oh no, it's still coming. So.
Well, I think the most brilliant part about this movie is even the way it was marketed, because Hitchcock made specific rules for movie theaters not to let anyone in after the movie started. Because
no, I think he kind of, in that regard, he changed. I mean, he may not have done it single-handedly, but he sort of famously changed movie-going habits. Because I think, like in the olden days, you'd sort of pay your fare and go in partway through a movie, or there's a sort of phrase, this is where we came in. So yeah, you could go in, stay for a couple of hours, and then come out again, or stay there all day, if you wanted to. But yeah, because Hitchcock was so protective of this film, I think he took a leaf out of Clouseau's book when he was marketing Diabolique. Basically, don't spoil the ending. I've actually got a poster in my room at home that says, "No one but no one will be admitted to the theatre after the start of each performance of Hitchcock's Psycho." And they'd have kind of like announcements over the tannoy, "Don't give away the ending, it's the only one we have." And apparently he employed like detectives and policemen from Pinkerton's to make sure that, on the doors of cinemas, to make sure that people wouldn't spoil the ending. It may be similar to Star Wars, when that came out in the sort of mid to late 70s, sorry, the reveal of Luke's father, for example, is what I'm trying to get at. Spoiler alert.
And I feel like this too, Becca, that would never be kind of done today. I cannot imagine, even if a director as big as like Nolan or Spielberg, to tell theaters, we can't let people in.
No, you couldn't do that. I just think it wouldn't happen, and especially with social media and everything like that, I can't imagine they'd have to go to great lengths. Although I remember going to see like some of the new like Star Wars films in sort of the last few years, and then some of like the celebrity cameos that they have. We were like, oh, quite surprising. Or, unless you're really dialed in and you have no willpower and you want to know everything about a movie, you probably can go in blind or go in without any prior knowledge. But I would agree. I think we'd be very hard pressed to do that today. Probably wouldn't be allowed to do that.
No, there's no way. Theaters are not going to risk any, money being lost to movie theaters. They are not going to take that risk.
No, it's too important. No, it's too expensive. But yeah, no, I think that was really cool. It basically kind of changed movie going habits. I think that's. I mean, obviously, Psycho is a very old film now. Celebrates 65 years next year. And it's a very famous movie. A lot has been said on it. A lot has been written on the topic. So not much new that can be gained from it, I guess. But I think this is why I love it, because it was so innovative, so daring, so shocking for the time. Even like for all the cast's and crew's career as well. Like Tony Perkins, his kind of career as an up and coming idol, basically, he was the next James Dean, or certainly being groomed to be that way. This was a complete left turn for his career. So much so that he ended up having to buy himself out of his contract under Paramount, and then seeking work in Europe for years, and then obviously had a successful career. But eventually returning to Psycho 2 in 1982, 83, whenever it came out.
Yep.
Yeah, 83, that was it. And then, it took him 22 years to sort of, what's the word, like reconnect with the role of Norman Bates, to kind of reconcile that part, and then go on to make 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. It's just incredible, the sort of the mark that it had on the career. So
yeah, well, let's do this right now, because I do have
sorry.
an old... No, you are just fine. We're going to do this right now. I've got an old radio ad spot of the Psycho that I'm going to play for you all right now, and then we're going to just kind of like dive in and just talk about this iconic classic, all right?
May I have your attention, please? I have been asked to explore the serious side of Alfred Hitchcock. Very likely, I suspect, because I am Alfred Hitchcock. I have chosen to do this through the following serious statement. I want you to see Psycho, a motion picture, exactly the way I originally made it, uncut, with every scene intact, especially the famous shower bath scene, which the TV version did not dare show. This occurs 44 minutes from the start of Psycho. Watch for it. And remember, no one will be admitted to see Psycho except from the very beginning. I now leave you with this final serious message.
Suggested for mature audiences.
So, yeah, I think it's just kind of a great thing to have him do that to promote a movie. And it's so nice to actually have a director come on and promote their own material. And I don't really see other directors doing that. Like, directors will go on TV shows, but never,
Yeah, so something that's quite uncommon, I guess, was it? Yeah, it wasn't very much heard of. Like, I mean, like today, directors of filmmakers, they'll come on a chat show, maybe promote their work, actors, that sort of thing. But yeah, to have the director come on the radio or come on the TV, and say, we're showing this film in its entirety, don't spoil the ending, especially the shower scene as well. I mean, I think famously there are kind of two or three different versions. Obviously, there was the version that edited for TV that had, I think there's only a few minutes or a few seconds in it. So I think there was a few seconds cut from maybe the shower scene. In the scene where Norman cleans up as well, there's a shot like where he looks at his hands and they're all covered in blood. So a few scenes were excised from that, and then also a scene where like Arbogast dies. There's like a seconds or so that's also cut from that. So there's that version, and then I think in 2020 there was the 60th anniversary release, and that was the whole film kind of uncut, as it were. So everything left in, nothing cut out, nothing left on the floor.
Well, very nice. Well, besides the things that are kind of getting cut out of this movie, I think what a lot of people kind of misinterpret about this movie, because most people just know just that one famous sequence, but they don't know like the context of what happens. And I remember my first time watching this movie, and I don't know if this is the same for you or not, is that I got so invested into Marion Crane trying to steal the money and trying to go one up over on her boss and the people at the bank that I completely forgot about the shower sequence. I really thought that was like a different girl that happened to. Because when you watch this movie and you're seeing Marion Crane doing these things to get the money, and she has to use the money to buy a new car because her old car could be suspected, you're really just into that storyline that you forget like halfway through that she is like in any danger. Even when she meets Anthony Perkins' character Norman Bates, I just thought their dynamic was so great, and it felt kind of like real. And he seemed to open up a part of her that she didn't know that was there, and he helps her realize that she's in this trap and that she could be in serious trouble for stealing money from the bank. And he helps her realize that you need to get out of this. You are like going to be going down a bad road. And you're like, great, she's going to give the money back and things are going to be fine. And then crap happens on her. And I just really think that.
And then Mother strikes.
Exactly. And I just think that first half of the movie is just so greatly like structured, and I think even for audiences today they can go back and watch that and still follow the plotline as ever.
I would agree actually. I mean, the first section of that film does kind of play out like with Marion's story. Because obviously you'd be following her as Janet Leigh. You know, she's probably one of the most famous actresses of her era around that time. You know, so you'd be following her and her story, and you'd fully expected to kind of, you know, give the money back. And I'd quite happily watch that as a series of maybe Alfred Hitchcock Presents, if they made that sort of a mini movie on its own. Maybe
it does seem that way.
It does. Well, I think that's another reason why I do like the movie so much, because it sort of defies genre classification. It's many genres in one. Like, it's a drama, it's a melodrama, it's a very pitch black comedy. I went to a screening recently, and all the audience laughed in the right place, and that was good to know. It's like a romance,
think about the last
mystery.
Movie. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I was just saying, I would agree. You'd be following her story from start to end. If it wasn't for that shower scene, but really heavily invested in her for sure. And like you say, they only, like, her and Tony Perkins really have just that very short dinner scene together, spend very little time on screen with each other really, but they have instant chemistry. There's I can't remember the name of the article, but there's a critic, Slavoj Zizek, whose name I can't pronounce, I'm sorry, basically argued that they are the same side, different sides of the same coin, or the different side of the same Mobius strip. I think that was his theory.
The yin and yang, I guess.
Yeah.
Or,
Pardon?
Well, I do think it's great, Becca, that this movie came out after North by Northwest.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right.
And I kind of feel like that Marion Crane is almost kind of like almost like a distant cousin of Roger Thornhill to be involved.
Yeah,
in,
she's kind of she's caught up in this mystery. She's on the run. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're great stark contrast of each other. You've got this glamorous proto Bond movie, glorious Technicolor, Cary Grant looking really hot in that grey suit. If I don't mind me saying, and then you've got Psycho, which is a really grubby, filthy 1960s black and white, very cheaply made film. Both containing characters on the run, or innocent person abroad, which is very much a Hitchcock trope. But there is definitely a through line. There is a sort of maybe a strip there. I would agree for sure. That's something I never thought of. So good point.
Well, and I know that this sort of came out around the same year as Diabolique, right?
I think so. Around the same sort of time. Yeah. Again, based on the same story, based on the story by the same author of Vertigo, the same authors even, who wrote the story of Vertigo, what became Vertigo. And I think Hitchcock was furious that he couldn't get the rights to it first. That Clouseau, I can't pronounce his name. Yeah. Henri Georges Clouseau kind of beat him to it almost, and he managed to out Hitchcock. So fair play to him.
I love Diabolique very much. I would have loved to see Hitchcock take on that movie, and I would love to see that director of Diabolique take on Psycho. And I think that would have been interesting. That would just be so cool. That should have been like their sort of like next project of them remaking each other's works and just see.
Yeah, why didn't they? Oh my gosh! Yeah, I think they did. I think that famous interview between Hitchcock and Truffaut, I think they chat about it a little bit. And also, don't forget at this time, I must mention it because I'm slightly obsessed. obviously Michael Powell in England was making Peeping Tom at the time, so I think the two films came out certainly over here in the UK like within months of each other. One came out in the springtime and the other came out like in the summer, I think. Both, very shocking. But Peeping Tom was obviously very harmful to Powell's career, whereas Psycho was a huge success for Hitchcock. So they kind of took, even though they were contemporaries, their careers took very different paths after the 1960 movies, respectively.
Do you think audiences were not ready to see Michael Powell's Peeping Tom because it was in color? Is a lot more shocking. The sequences of the POV kills would probably feel very uncomfortable to audiences in the 60s. I can imagine those scenes being shocking now, but even more
now they're commonplace. I mean, we saw what was it, In a Violent Nature, which was entirely from that POV. But it's something that has been imitated since. But yeah, I think when it came out, from my understanding of reading about the making of that film, like at the time, like it was reviewed positively by the trade. But yeah, audiences simply weren't ready for that kind of thing. It was something shocking. I think the first time, obviously, we kind of seen aspects of it in like Hangover Square. What was that? I want to say The Bat. It might not have been The Bat, sort of classic horror movie that used a POV shot. But this was the first time we kind of saw something like that happen. You're kind of stuck from that point of view. Obviously, there's a scene in Psycho as well where Norman kind of peeps through a hole at Marion, and we have that POV shot, but it's only for a brief moment on screen. But this is like the film's opening sequence is basically an eye, and then we cut to kind of Mark approaching this prostitute on the street, and then from there on in it's his camera or nothing really. And yeah, I would kind of agree, and it kind of just shoved the voyeuristic nature of cinema in people's faces, whether we liked it or not. And yeah, it was just a bit too much for the time. But thank God for Scorsese discovering it in the 70s, 79, 80s. Of course. And rehabilitating it basically. So, hurrah.
Right. And I definitely will have to go back. I want to have you back to do a full episode about Peeping Tom.
Oh God! I'll explain.
I'll have you. Well, I mean,
sorry, slight hijack there of the series. Sorry.
No. Just for our listeners out there who are not familiar with Peeping Tom, can you just give them like a small sort of like synopsis of the movie? Very small.
Oh God, very short synopsis. Okay, yeah, so it's basically about a man who can't get the shot he wants. This cameraman, basically, he's a sort of cameraman by day, but by night he's a serial killer, wanting to capture the ultimate face of fear on film. And he does this with his killer Cine camera that he has. And it's done in quite a shocking way that it ended the director's career in 1960 when it's released. Again, it's one of these movies where it's perhaps maybe underrepresented. It's now it was once reviled, but it's now revered as a classic. It received a wonderful 4K restoration last year, 2023, that was overseen by Thelma Schoonmaker and Martin Scorsese themselves. Obviously, Scorsese haven't built a relationship with Powell since trying to find him again in the 70s and 80s. And then the BFI having this wonderful Powell and Pressburger series at the end of last year that's now travelling around the world. But yeah, check out Peeping Tom if you're in the mood for a really grubby, grungy, lurid Eastman colour proto-slasher horror film. I mean, it's very dated, very tame by today's standards. Everyone has very clipped RP English accents, apart from the lead man who was German. But yeah, do check it out. Really well worth your time.
A lot of our listeners are into that sort of like lurid pop material. No worries about that. And I gotta say, going back to Psycho here.
Sorry. Let's get back to the main subject.
That is fine right there, right? I think the black and white of the 60s kind of adds to the grittiness of the horror.
It's very much kind of got that era. It could be like a melodrama, or it could be a noir. There's lots of noir aspects to it as well. We're in November now, and it's Noirvember. So Psycho is a good one to watch as well, because there's a lot of noir aspects to it.
There's almost just because of the type of cameras that were more easily available to people, it has almost like this snuff quality to it. Kind of like the same way that Tobe Hooper did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and that style, where it feels kind of like gritty.
It's kind of very gritty, very grainy.
Yeah, this almost feels like I'm watching like police style footage at some moments there. And I really love how Hitchcock basically switches us to be the other character. For the first half, Marion Crane is our audience avatar. We are following things from her perspective. But when she is killed, and the moment, at least for me, you might be different, but the moment that Anthony or Norman Bates sees the crime and he puts his hand over his mouth, for me, that's when it sort of switches over to be his story. Because,
okay, yeah.
well, because now the context of this, because earlier we saw him having a fight with his mother, and you know that his mother's very mean and doesn't like other people. When he sees what happens, he knows, shit, this is my mother, all right?
Bugger.
I can't let people take away my mother from me, so I am just going to do what I can. And it seems like he has to do this many times before. He's always had to clean up his mother's mess. And
yeah, he's like, oh god, not again.
Because he does not want to have to her be locked away, and it seems like that has happened before. And yes, folks, I realize what happens at the end. Okay, all right, I know that. I know you're just talking on your screen, but I'm really
we know what happens. It's okay.
For people that don't know anything about Psycho, and I don't know why you won't. I'm talking to those people. So you're having Norman Bates clean up this mess, and the part that always gets me every time is when he goes to sink the car, and the car stops.
Yes.
And you're like, oh crap, he's going to get caught. And I should be thinking this way because, like, no, he shouldn't be, because he's trying to cover up for crime.
No, it's wrong. That's why it's so shocking. I mean, yeah, I would kind of agree. We kind of, we recently had a guest on our podcast. It won't be released until we, the episode that we recorded won't be released till we actually come to review Psycho, which will probably be next year now. Yeah, so we were discussing at which point, are we totally switched over to Norman's side? I would kind of agree with you, where it is that point where he's just, he sees what has happened and is just completely shocked. And he knocks that burn painting off the wall. And then the other moment is literally like when he pushes the car into the swamp. And then you kind of see it sort of sinks, and then it stops. And you think, oh my God. And there's a scene where like he literally just kind of stops staring at it. I think he turns his head and then turns back around. And you think, oh my God. And that's when Hitchcock has you. Literally, that's when he's basically transferred you over. And yeah, that's kind of why it's so shocking. And you totally shouldn't feel that way, but you do.
You do. And I still think like the little subtle things that Purtis does, his bait of candy.
Yeah, that was his idea apparently. Yeah, to sort of munch on candy corn throughout the whole thing, which I had never had. I do think it's not very popular over here. In America, I gather like it's a really popular treat that's eaten maybe around Halloween, but it's not very sort of well known. I think over here, certainly in the UK, I'd never tried it since I lived in the USA briefly for university, and I was like, oh, candy corn! Oh, I know that from Psycho.
Yes.
Quite embarrassing, unfortunately. I didn't tell anybody that, but I was like, oh, okay. Quite sad. Sheltered little life I've led. But yeah, so that's quite good fun.
No, very, very cool. I also really like Vera Miles and John Gavin. Oh, sorry, yeah, John Gavin as them trying to investigate the disappearance of her sister.
Yeah, they sort of become our audience avatars for the second half, don't they? I guess, as you say.
Yeah, those sort of do actually, because we're kind of like, we are seeing things from their perspective as well, but also at the same time too, you kind of like identify with Norman Bates and not want to see his mother gets hurt, which is really great because when you watch this movie, you can sort of like take each of those characters and sort of like make them the audience avatar. So you have Marion's sister and Marion's boyfriend, and they're going to try and solve what happens. That's their own little mystery. It almost seems like this movie has like almost three kind of separate stories to it, but each of them are just as engaging as the last.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're all kind of intertwined, aren't they, I guess? But yeah, I think Hitchcock famously sort of said that the characters of Sam and Lila were basically like stick figures, like they weren't that interesting. But I kind of argue that they are. I mean, John Gavin, he does get some stick for being quite wooden. I think, yeah, he was kind of yeah, I don't know really what to say. He gives an okay performance. Could be better, but there he is. But yeah, Vera Miles, she's fabulous. I think she was Hitchcock wanted her to take over from Kim Novak, I think. But unfortunately, Vera Miles fell pregnant. And then Hitchcock banished her forever. Wasn't really happy. But she was fabulous as Lila in Psycho. Really determined sister. She has a lot of drive. She really wants to get to the bottom of the mystery. Doesn't want to deal with Sam's BS. Has enough of his nonsense. Has so much agency as well. But yeah, I totally agree that her and Sam are basically audience avatars really. And their kind of guide to solving this mystery and getting to the bottom of what happened. But yeah, I would agree. I totally agree with you. It kind of got like three separate strands, but they all complement each other really well. And yeah, there's no kind of nothing boring about it, I don't think.
Well, I do tend to think that Vermiles tends to go a little bit more overacting than needs to be, but it's not bad, and I totally get why her character does certain things because her sister has been missing and everything. She's very distraught and worried about it.
And plus it was 1960, so maybe sort of acting today might be a bit more subtle. So like in that awful 1998 remake by Gus Van Sant, I think Julianne Moore played the role of Lila, and she was I think she had some sort of like LGBT undertones, which was very progressive for the time, and is a great addition to the character actually, I think. But yeah, she was a lot more kind of I was going to say aggressive, that's probably not the right word. She had a lot more agency, I feel, but she kind of, it's a very understated role, I will say. She didn't overact as much as Vera Miles did, I would agree.
Well, that is a good segue.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, nice.
Into the remake of Psycho, which I've
got that somewhere as well, somewhere in my archive. I've got it.
And I just going to talk briefly about the remake, directed by Gus Van Sant, featuring Anne Heche as Marion Crane.
Yeah, the late great Anne Heche. Oh, she was lovely.
Oh, great! Julianne Moore as Lila Crane, Viggo Mortensen as the boyfriend of Marion, and Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates, William H. Macy as the investigator. And I have no really big issues with this remake. I've listened to the commentary track, and Gus Van Sant's reasoning for doing a remake, which almost in a way feels like kind of like a punk rock art house version that a studio made. And I'm taking this quote from Ty West from Matt Scene and at House of the Devil. And he mentioned that this almost feels like a punk rock art film project that the studio made that they didn't know they were making. And in the commentary track, Gus Van Sant stated that, he knows that this is a cock movie. He made this right after Good Will Hunting. He could have just done everything. But
literally, they couldn't be so different. But he made it so that other directors, other filmmakers wouldn't have to.
Well,
I would totally agree. It was basically like an art project. But I mean, to be fair, it does get a lot of stick. But there's lots of pluses to it. I mean, like every movie, there's lots of pros, lots of cons. But yeah, like performances are great. Vince Vaughn, I think it was probably one of his earliest roles. This is before he became a huge sort of figure known like for his comedy, known for his gross out comedy sort of roles. This is a very, very early role for him, maybe his sort of second or third feature, I guess, quite early on in his career. I think he was around 27, 28, so he was roughly the same sort of age that Tony Perkins was when he made the film. And yeah, he had got his hair cut. Not that he was a big guy, but he had to lose a lot of bulk, like for the role. So he made a bit of a transformation for the role. And it is in nice lurid, I say lurid, that's quite a big word, colour as well, which is something that Hitchcock couldn't have done. There are a lot of technical innovations as well. obviously a lot of shots that Hitchcock couldn't achieve just because technology had moved on. Like today, they'd probably make it with a drone. I imagine the big opening shot over what was meant to be Phoenix would probably be made with a drone today. There are a couple of aspects in the original, Joe Stefano's original script, which were cut due to censorship reasons, which then appeared in the remake as well. So there's a lot of things in the original script that were brought back. So again, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's very sacrilege. But there's lots to enjoy about it as well. So,
okay, I will say this though. I think the casting is off on this one. Don't get me wrong. I think Anne Heche does a great job with the material, but I would have casted someone else in that role because you want someone that was more kind of like well known and iconic. I think.
Yeah,
Vince
I don't know how
Vaughn,
big she was of a star at the time. I think she was quite famous.
was she famous right there? Okay, I mean I know she did that movie.
But
with
I don't know if
Harrison
she
Ford.
was as famous as like Janet Leigh was in the role at that time. I mean, I kind of knew her basically from the Jurassic Park sequel.
Sure. Also with Vince
because both
Vaughn
her and William H. Macy were in that as well. So
and Vince Vaughn too. They're all
and Vince
three of
Vaughn as
them were
well.
in
Yep.
that.
I just basically knew them from Jurassic Park at the time, growing up.
Oh, sure.
As I did in the UK in the 90s.
That's fair. I love the color cinematography.
Yeah,
in
it looks
this
good.
movie.
Yeah, really nice bright colours.
It is so cool. The cinematographer is from Christopher Doyle, the same
He's
cat
wonderful.
who
He's
shot.
really good.
He shot In the Mood for Love.
Oh, yeah, it looks so beautiful, doesn't it? Oh my god.
And
Why?
so I was listening to the commentary track, and Gus Van Sant said he wanted to do this because it's an iconic movie, but many people don't watch old black and white movies, and so his idea is that I'm gonna make this for a little bit newer audience. And he was talking on the commentary track because the costume designer had no idea that this is supposed to be like a modern version, so all the clothes feel like they're from the older time period and it's mixed in with this new time period. It just has its own type of vibe to it. And
Yeah, there's
I
almost a
dig
kind
it
of
very
sort of
much.
vintage sort of vibe, I would say. Like with the remake, the sort of clothing that they dress Viggo Mortensen in as Sam, like he's sort of very much like a cowboy. He wears a sort of 10-gallon cowboy hat, and like boots and everything like that. So it's kind of like this cowboy sort of figure almost. Really colourful costumes. Vince Vaughn wears some amazingly jazzy shirts. He's got quite a great, he sort of makes Norman a bit more colourful with all the cool shirts that he wears. It's colourful, shot beautifully. Music's really good as well. Sounds fantastic. Lots to enjoy. Lots to enjoy.
Danny Elfman kind of doing the adaptation score of this one. And so I don't know
really
if you're
good.
aware of
Really
this.
good. It sounds fantastic.
So I don't know if you're aware of this, Becca, but Steven Soderbergh, the director of Traffic and Aaron Brockovich and Solaris, one of my other favorite remakes.
Oh gosh, yes. That was quite a decent remake.
Very much so. He took both Psychos, both the original Hitchcock and the Gus Van Sant remake. He changed the Gus Van Sant to be in black and white to match, and he made this thing called Psychos, where he would have
I've heard of that,
one
but I've never
scene-
seen it.
It would take one scene of the 60s Psycho, and then the next scene would be the 98 Psycho, and he would kind of go back and forth with it. But the cool thing is that when it comes to the shower sequence, he would superimpose one on top of the other.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard of that, but I've never actually seen it. I wonder if it's available.
It was available on his website. I don't know if it's still available now or if he has it still there. I'm not quite sure. But it is really great, and you can kind of see how detailed Van Sant was and to do it an actual remake. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to do just an actual remake because that's what a remake is. And there's been other adaptations of famous plays and stories that are like a remake. And that's sort of been my issue too with the whole thing of remakes or adaptations is when people say it's not a remake, it's an adaptation or it's an adaptation of something else. Like when the Mean Girls musical came out, for me that was a remake. But other people says no, it's an adaptation because they're adapting it from.
I suppose, yeah, because it was an adaptation of the musical, wasn't it? I guess, which in itself, I mean, it's one of those really interesting things, isn't it? Is it a remake? Is it adaptation? Is it homage? Is it a spoof? I mean, I did something similar for my undergrad dissertation. I think because it was like the mid 2000s, Bush was in power. I think we just recently had the remake of Manchurian Candidate come out, maybe a couple of years before.
Yeah,
so it's
Jonathan
kind of
Demme.
like all these.
Yeah.
Jonathan Demme film. Yeah, that was So it was kind of that, but kind of the view of through the lens of maybe like unilateralism or something like that. I was doing American as my degree, American studies, so it had sort of political twist to it. So no offense meant at all.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I think that was quite interesting. Anything like that. I mean, you take the Bond movies, to a certain degree, the adaptation of Ian Fleming's novels. Like I'm a big Shakespeare nerd as well. His plays have been remade, adapted, hundreds and hundreds of times. At what point is an adaptation? At what point is it remake? We just had Halloween. Phantom of the Opera is a classic story that's been remade, adapted to the nth degree. Quite famously, many many different times. Where does it end?
Exactly. And I think the last thing I will say about the remake is I did not like the way that it was marketed, because you knew right away that Norman Bates was.
It kind of gave the ending away, didn't it? It sort of
totally
the
gave
ending a little
everything
bit.
away. And I don't know what the marketing was for that. Maybe they thought that everyone else has seen Psycho and maybe no one else did. So I did not like the way the movie was marketed. With the original movie, you have a movie that's several years old. And I recently was at a Halloween party and I had friends of mine watch this movie. And halfway through, one of them goes, "You know what? I don't think I've ever seen this movie before." Because they only knew about that sequence of the shower sequence when Norman Bates, oh my gosh, I gave it away. Oh no, I gave it away.
Spoiler
Oh my gosh, spoiler alert for a movie that's almost like
for a 60-odd-year-old film.
Oh my gosh, whatever I've done. They just thought that the movie would be focusing on Norman Bates instead of Marion Crane and her adventures, and they were really
that's quite interesting though. I mean, because it's an old film, it's in black and white, it's kind of a bit slow to start, by today's standards. That there are aspects of it that perhaps were shocking but are not anymore. So it's always quite interesting to get the perspective of somebody who's perhaps not seen it before, or doesn't like to watch movies that are old or black and white, for example. So I think the remake was quite good in that regard, because it really updated everything, brought it in colour, made using modern technology, modern at the time for 1998. All these different modern techniques that didn't exist in 1960.
Sure.
But yeah, I always think it's interesting to get. So like over here, we recently had a re-release, the 40th anniversary of Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Sure.
And especially over here, I don't know about the UK. You might have to about the US. You have to let me know. But over here in the UK, BBFC reduced the rating from 18 down to a 15, which brings it to a whole new audience. I don't think very much was cut from it at all. Maybe a couple of seconds. But again, having that 80s-ness of it gives it a bit of distance. So for today's audiences, and obviously it's not as scary. I was speaking with this to a friend of mine. And he said it's less scary than like Saw or Terrifier movies, for example, to quote my friend, which I totally agree. It was probably shocking back in 1984, but today perhaps not so much. I mean, it's still scary, and he's still iconic as Freddy. But yeah, the fact that it kind of been re-released and made available to a whole new generation, especially of younger audiences and to teenagers, just really opens it up. Makes it accessible to a whole new generation.
I think you have to have your movie be set in the right situation. Like, I went to a screening of Night of the Living Dead, which I've seen before, but seeing it in a theater brings it into a whole different.
Yeah, it's great seeing these films on the big screen, isn't it? I'm really. It sounds really bad, but I noticed, like, since the pandemic, especially, there's been a lot of, obviously, cinemas are crying out to get butts on seats. Especially showing like older movies and that, for example, just seeing them on the big screen just makes it so much better. Like, obviously, being a huge Bond fan, there's a famous cinema in London called Prince Charles Cinema, and for the last couple of years, obviously 2022 was like the anniversary of the Bond series. since Dr. No came out, and they just showed all of the Bond films, including Never Say Never Again and the 60s Casino Royale. And they've done them like for the last couple of years, and just like seeing the Bond movies on the big screen is just a whole another experience. Something completely different, so much better. I mean, some people prefer to watch films at home and they could do it in their own leisure and sit on their phone whilst they do it. No. But yeah, seeing movies on the big screen is the way to go if you can do it.
Yeah, and I think like with the movie like Psycho, if it ever has like an anniversary, I'm sure there'll be some teachers or parents that'll bring their kids to the movie. I know they seem reluctant to see it, but I do have a feeling that a lot of people, even younger people, will get into this movie, especially if you're a horror fan. I feel like Psycho is one of those movies that you have to really watch if you're any type of like horror or aficionado or even like a thriller aficionado, to know all the tropes and the things that happen. Like, I know John Carpenter took a lot of things from Psycho to adapt it into Halloween. Because I know Ebert famously said, this is the most greatest horror film since Psycho. And you can definitely see all those elements that were in Halloween, the voyeurism that have happened as well.
Well, this is it. Or maybe Carpenter watched Peep and Tom as well for that whole POV point
I'm
of view.
sure he did.
That opens the film. And same with Black Christmas as well.
100%.
I mean, it's often said that like Halloween is probably the first slasher, but I would probably argue in the US that title belongs to Black Christmas, I would say.
Sure. Definitely, Bob Clark did a great job with that. But I like the fact with Halloween, just like Psycho, it's very limited on what they could do with the blood. And to make sure
yeah. There's only so much they could do
without being too much gory. And you have like a very strong female character. We have a strong female character with Leslie Strode, as you do with like Marion Crane, and you kind of follow these characters throughout their journeys, and you're just really into their elements with it, and I just love that very much.
I love how like Jamie Lee Curtis has become a screen queen in her own right. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. She's just iconic.
It's Janet Leigh's daughter. Being
I know that's amazing.
Carpenter wanted to cast her because Janet Leigh's daughter being in a horror
film. But
again.
who else could you cast? Nobody else. She's perfect.
I did one bad things into like Psycho a little bit here, the original one. That shower sequence, were you surprised at all your first time watching that to have that happen?
I probably was. Yeah, I think it's such a twist. I mean, because you're so invested in Marion's story, you really believe her. You know she's committed theft, this sort of heinous act, and you kind of think, okay, she's had a dinner with Norman, and she convinces her to sort of go and take the money back. And then you sort of fully expect that to happen. You don't expect this great big twist to come in and find her hacked to death when she's quite, she's naked and, quite a vulnerable moment. And I say, watching this for the first time, I probably was shocked. I probably was surprised and didn't expect it, didn't see it coming. I knew there was something famous about that scene, but I didn't quite know what it was. But I think I probably was,
Even though the knife never made any contact with her body, per se, it was
it's cut in such a way, isn't it? You don't see it kind of go in. I think you probably could be that nerdy person, and then having the Blu-ray, you probably could stop it in every single scene should you wish to. I mean, you might see some side boob, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you do. Yep. There's some side boob on there, that's for sure.
Sorry to bring the rating up to 18 there. But I mean, it's one of those great illusions of cinema, really, isn't it? It never kind of really happens. You just think it does.
100%. There's a book called The Girl in the Shower that talks about the body double and how that scene was shot.
Marley Renfro, was it? It might have been.
Might have been. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm very kind of curious to check that out. And then there's a famous documentary that goes into the shower sequence, but I'm not going to remember right now.
Is it 7852? Something like that.
Yes, that's it.
About the names of the how many shot setups and how long it took to make it. Yeah, that's a really great documentary as well. Some great contributors there from across the filmmaking universe. Highly recommend that one.
So I will ask you this: when watching this movie and you're seeing, the John Gavin and Vera Miles characters. They're investigating what's happening to Norma Bates, and they're talking to, I guess, the sheriff or the mayor of the city, and he mentions about, Norman Bates's mother dying, like both her
Oh yeah, John
and her
McIntyre is
boyfriend,
the sheriff. Yeah.
and they're dying right there. Did you get any sort of like fluent elements that, oh my gosh, Norman Bates actually, killed his mother the first time you watched this?
Yeah, it's a bit grimy, isn't it? It's sort of there's kind of elements of like the supernatural, or I didn't quite know what's going on. It's all a bit of a central mystery. But yeah, I think the first time I watched this, it was probably on TV, maybe late one night when I was perhaps too young to watch it. Yeah, I think I was kind of with my family. I was kind of like, oh, because we watched a lot of like mystery stuff like that. So yeah, I was kind of like, oh, I wonder what happened, and then I think I was a little bit perhaps slow on the uptake and didn't cotton on till the end. I was like, ugh. But yeah, when it's sort of finally revealed, it is a bit grim, and there's sort of elements of taxidermy and things like that, which is not a curious hobby. But yeah, there's kind of all kind of it's quite grimy, quite grotty, very creepy, I would say. But yeah, quite shocking as well.
Very much so. And I know for me, like when they're both investigating the Bates Motel and they get to the end where Lila Crane is going into the basement and she sees the rotten corpse of Mother. I remember the first time seeing that. That was a very kind of surprising moment. And then you see Norman Bates come out with the dress and the knife, and they stop him. They put him down. And
yeah,
then
that's quite scary. Quite a scary moment.
It was just out there shocking. And then like the next sequence, they're like explaining all this things that happened, and that Norma and his mother have
Simon
lived
Oakland,
together.
the psychiatrist sequence does go on and on and on and on. It goes on quite a long time.
And I like the way that, explains everything. And then at the end, the mother personality has fully taken over. And, that's sort of how the movie ends.
That sort of penultimate shot I think is really cool, because you got like the skull that's overlaid with Tony Perkins's face, the sort of rictus grin. And apparently that wasn't available, like that wasn't on every single print of the film. That was only on certain prints, which I think is quite interesting.
That is very weird.
But the explainer scene, I think that was kind of mainly to appease the censors. I think it was one of those endings that was all. I mean, Simon Oakland, he was brilliant as a psychiatrist. Apparently, he did all that scene in one take, which is very impressive.
That is very cool.
Yeah,
I will say this though: if you've never seen it, I do recommend that show Bates Motel.
Yeah, highly recommend that. Yeah, really good, really good. I think is it season 5, the last season, that they kind of ramp up like the psychoness of it. For example, they try to recreate. So basically, they obviously, who is it? Famous singer Rihanna. She appears as Marion, and Sam gets his own shower scene. Spoiler alert. And that there's a recreation with Norman and being interviewed by the police, and they do that kind of weird shot where it sort of cranes over and you see him from underneath. Bizarre shot of Freddie Highmore as Norman, and you see that shot from kind of almost underneath his chin. I can't quite describe it. It's a really weird shot that they try to recreate when he's being interrogated by the police.
I think
that was a really good show. Yeah, I enjoyed that. It was good fun.
Vera Farmiga is the mother, or
she was fabulous.
Norma.
She was really good. Like her and Freddie are the best things about it.
Yeah, Freddie Highmore just a great job, and it is a re-adaptation of.
Yeah, was that a remake or adaptation? Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to take place like many months before Psycho, but still, it incorporates elements of the movie into it like just so well. I think it's a very well done series. It's one that
really high production values. Really great cast. Really great script as well. I think sort of Vera and Freddie got to produce and direct and write episodes at various points along the series. They had quite a hand in it as well. Because I think Carlton Cuse, was he known for Lost? I didn't see it. I watched a couple of episodes, but I famously never watched Lost. But he was known for that. So he's quite a really big sort of showrunner at the time, along with Kerry Erin as well. So it was in really good hands all the way through. And I think it won lots of awards as well. But as far as I'm aware, so it was quite a popular series. I was gutted when it ended, really, but it had a really good run and was quite high rated during its time. So yeah, I highly recommend it as well.
Very good. All right, Becca, we are getting close to the end of
Yes.
our discussion of Psycho. I've got nothing more to sort of say about the movie. I think it is still iconic. I think you can watch it any other time. I'm going to give a rating of 5 out of 5 stars because I don't think there's any flaws in this movie. Maybe some flaws in some of the acting, but it's not that much to bring it down any grade. So this is a classic. I got to do 5 out of 5.
Yeah,
What would
you
rate this
can't
movie?
really do more than that. I would agree. It's a classic, 100%.
100% there.
It's an oldie but a goldie.
Oldie but a goldie. I love that. Before we go, Becca, please tell the listeners all again where to find your podcast and everything you do and anything you want to promote or share.
Oh gosh, yeah. So we're called Do You Expect Us to Talk? You can find us wherever you get your podcast. We're on most platforms: Stitcher, Podbay, Podbean, Spotify. We're also on socials. We're on Twitter, X at Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on Facebook. Just type in Do You Expect Us to Talk? We're also on YouTube. You can find all our videos on there. Just search for Do You Expect Us to Talk? You can drop us an email, expectustotalk@gmail.com. Get in touch with us. We cover a wide range of movie series. We currently have a Hitchcock season. We're up to just done Foreign Correspondent, 1940, and then our next film, we're skipping some films, and our next film will be Suspicion. Cary Grant may or may not have killed Jane Fontaine. So that'll be our next movie. But yeah, basically, yeah, you can just search for Do You Expect to Talk? You can find us on whichever platform you listen to us on. So yeah, come check us out.
Very cool. And I promise I'll put links to their shows in the show notes. Highly recommend everyone does check that out. Greatly appreciate that. As for Cinema Recall, we're just getting back from our long hiatus going on there, and we're going to plan to do back to having more episodes at least every week, or at least every couple of weeks right now. We're still in the midst of Christmas time and getting things ready for our Christmas celebration. And but please check out the other podcast that I host over at Rabbit Hole Podcast called The Rotten Truth. Jason Soto and I review movies that have gotten a low score on Rotten Tomatoes and decides, hey, is it really that bad? So we have episodes coming up there. I hope you check that out. As always, thank you for listening to Cinema Recall Podcast. You can find us everywhere on the net. We're on Instagram and on X and Blue Sky. We're going to be getting into a lot more places there. So really appreciate you. Check that out. Website is cinemarecall.net. Huge thank you to Becca for being on the show. We've been spending so many times trying to schedule this episode.
I'm glad we finally made it. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
I am honored, and I'm hoping I can come back. I can come on to your guys' podcast.
Yes, we'd love to have you on. Let's make it happen. Hopefully in the new year.
Flick. And I'd love to have you back on here again soon. I'm hoping to visit where you live and hang out and hit some pubs or whatnot. But
sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Again, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you all have a good night.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.